All right, let's take a look now at multifamily properties. Um, Slide number one. This is a duplex. A duplex is generally known as a multifamily. It's the most common multifamily property. It's like you have a unit on one side, a unit on another. It could have a unit above and below. Typically, they share one wall between them, and they don't have an interior connection. So like there's no door in the middle of here where that connects these two units. These are two separate structure or two separate units. However, they're one structure, which really makes it easier when you're pouring concrete. You can pour two instead of one. When you're putting in air conditioning, you can put it in for both. This is basically like one big house that they've split down the middle and made two houses out of it. So that's why a duplex is the most common multifamily property. Then you have a triplex. A triplex is an apartment building that includes three separate living units. And by the way, when people say like because this is one big building right here, if I were to ask somebody like, hey, how many rentals do you have? They could say I have one triplex, or they could say I have three doors. One, two, three. And three doors meaning they have three units that are rented out currently. It could be connected to other buildings like row houses. You could have three stacked on top of each other. You could have one really big one and two small ones next to them. They don't have to be symmetrical or identical. They just have to be three units all connected by a wall in the building, whether it be like here and they're connected on top of each other or side by side with each other. This is a fourplex, a building with four units and four separate entrances. The management demands they can, like, a lot of times your management of four units is gonna increase a lot. Like you've basically got four doors that you've got to take care of. So if like the air conditioner goes out on this one, or if the toilets around this one, there's just a lot more things you deal with because you've got four units. But again, this is one big, huge, massive building that they have split down four ways here to make four separate units. You typically can cover the entire mortgage with two of these units. So the other two are just kind of gravy. So a lot of times what happens is an owner will live in one of the units and they will rent out the other three to people. And as long as those two are rented, they're going to have, they're going to be able to cover their mortgage on that particular property. These are great though. I mean, these are really, really good for housing. In Oregon, when my mom passed away, we looked at getting the land. My mom had two lots, and we looked at adding and splitting one of the lots off and building a fourplex on it. And normally Oregon was really hard, lots of red tape to get things done. But because there was a housing shortage up there, and because rents have just been going through the roof, I called the city and said, hey, I'm interested in potentially putting in a fourplex on this property. And they looked at the measurements, whatever, and they were like, we'll approve that immediately. And I'm like, you will? And they're like, yes, we have housing crisis. So these types of units that are not apartment complexes, they're not single family houses, they're fourplexes, give a lot of families units to be able to live in. Now be aware if you have one more unit on here. So let's say, for instance, you decide to split this one right here in the middle and you add stairwell to the side and you make it a fifth unit. Once you have 5 units, you're no longer residential. And residential is important because residential is like what any mom and pop landlord can own. Once you go to 5, you become commercial, like an apartment complex. Once you go from 4 to 5, you no longer are a residential normal property. You now are apartment complex, which has all sorts of other rules that go with it and govern it. So what do you think would be the most profitable, buying 2 duplexes or buying 1 fourplex? Take 45 seconds to answer that. And you can see here all the different types of duplexes that you could have for these units as well, just the styles that are out there. All right. So the pros to multifamily housing, you have more space than an apartment typically. So like if you have a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex, typically you're going to get more space. You're also probably going to get you're going to get amenities like a house where you're going to have like a yard, and maybe you might be able to have a dog because you have a yard in the back. That does require that like each tenant, if you have one of these units, each tenant has to maybe mow the backyard to this. Maybe the front yard is common, so there's got to be some kind of like landscaping crew that you as a landlord own, or you have to contract to come do this. But typically, like this land right here would be mowed by the tenant, and they would be maintained by the tenant. But fourplexes, you may just say, you know what, landscaping is included in this thing. They're typically cheaper than renting a whole house all by themselves, obviously, because you're sharing a wall with somebody, which people don't always want to do. But you're definitely going to have more privacy than an apartment. Like this right here, you don't have anybody living above you. You only have one person on this side of you, which is great. Now, if you're one of the middle units, you have people on either side of you, which is fine. It's still better than not having somebody above you or below you. The cons to multifamily properties: they're more expensive than an apartment, typically for the tenant. The tenants don't always love that they're going to cost more, but you're getting more. You're getting a yard, and you're getting, you're getting maybe more space. Typically, the tenant is going to be required to do the landscaping, which isn't going to be a lot. Mostly, when you build a duplex, you're filling up the entire lot that you have with the structure. You might be living next door to your landlord, so like we'll hear from Michael, where he lives on one side and he rents out the other one, and it's kind of annoying because his tenant lives next door to him. So anytime anything goes wrong, they're knocking on his door like, hey, come fix this thing. So not always great, and you share a wall with other people. When you go to invest in real estate, should you buy a single family home, a 322, and get roommates, or should you get a duplex and live on one side and rent out the other? Which one would be better? Take 45 seconds to answer that. Okay. All right, so slide number 6. So there are two types of loans that you can get, and we're going to talk about this. I wanted to throw this in there because it's important. If you live in the property, you get what you call an owner-occupied loan. And so for all of you, when you're buying your house at 22, you need to live in it. You need to be there. Even if you have roommates or whatever you decide to do, when you rent the property or when you own the property and you live in it, you're going to get a rate that's going to be a half a point to 3/4 of a point lower. The other thing that's a big deal is that with owner occupied loans, you typically only need 5% down or sometimes even nothing down to be able to buy the property. The difference here is an investor loan is a loan you're getting for a property that you do not live in. So when I bought my house out in Rockwall for my tenants, I don't live in that property. So with this, I have to have 25% down. So let's put that into context. If the property is $200,000 and over here I have to put 5% down, that means I have to come up with 10 grand, which is not unheard of. Like you can save up 10 grand, no big deal. But on an investor, you have to put 25% down, meaning I have to put $50,000 down. So this makes it a lot more a lot better for you. And that's why you can live in this, as long as you live in this property for at least a year. And you then save up another 10 grand, you can move to the next property and and the loan doesn't change. It stays an owner occupied loan, which is wonderful, which is how you can buy several properties in your 20s and be able to have rental properties there that are, that you can rent out and you can start building your equity. I would definitely recommend this and having a couple roommates as a roommate hack so that you don't have to pay a lot in your monthly expenses. Why do you think that investor loans are seen as more risky to banks than owner-occupied loans? Why do they require 25% down? Why are they seen as so risky to bankers? I'll give you 45 seconds to answer that. Okay, so cash reserves. So this is another thing that's important for you to understand. And you're gonna need money for a down payment, you're gonna need money for closing costs and all that kind of stuff. And then you need to have reserves that are just somewhere else. It could be a Robinhood account, it could be Roth IRA. It needs to be somewhere you have $15,000 that's just sitting there and you're not using it for anything, but it's just in case. Banks love to see that you have a money off to the side that's not included in your checking. Maybe it's in your savings account, but they just want to see that you have some money in case, like, I don't know, something catastrophic happens to that house. You're doing a home inspection on it. You're doing all sorts of your due diligence to figure it out. But at the same time, you're also like something could go, the air conditioner could go out in the second month, and that's going to be $8,000. And so the bank want to see that you have some kind of cash reserves. So when you go to buy this property, you have money set aside in case anything kind of catastrophic happens. So that's why I tell you, before you're 22, set up your Roth IRA and start contributing to it. Start contributing to it now. Every year, think of it as I need to contribute $3,000 to $4,000 every year to this. And I know that's hard. Summer money, it's get a side hustle and throw it in there and just don't think about it. Put it aside to yourself where you're like, I'm not going to touch that money. It's going to sit there. And so when I'm 22, and by the way, if you're putting it into something where there's some kind of appreciation offered as well, like you're putting it into SPY or something else, you're going to get it's going to go up in value over the 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 years that you put it in there. So be aware that it's going to go up, or if you're getting dividends or whatever from it. But the great thing is just put it aside and just leave it there. And so when the bank goes to assess you for, like, when you go to buy your house when you're 22 and they say, okay, he's got his $10,000 for his down payment. Okay, he's got a good credit score. Okay, he's got a JOB. He's all good to go. What does he have on the side? What reserves does he have out there that he can draw from? And that's what this is right here. Okay, thanks, guys.